Okay, boys and girls, today we are going to learn how to do a wet into wet watercolor painting technique. We have a small piece of watercolor paper here. We have 3 different colors of paint, watercolor paint. We have a blue, a deep purple, and a black. With these colors, we're going to paint a space-like sky, and we're also going to be utilizing some common table salt that we will sprinkle onto the wet paint, and it creates some really cool effects. The first step that you want to do is you need to have your paper wet. The paper needs to be wet. So you'll take the spray bottle at your station and you're going to spray the paper a couple of times, and you're going to see that it starts to curl because one side of the paper is wet and the other side of the paper is dry. So you want to take your hand and rub the water all over the paper so it spreads out. And then you also need to turn it over because you can see how it's curling right now. Turn that over and you're going to spray the opposite side as well. So 2 sprays is usually plenty good. And you're going to go ahead and you're going to put the water all over the paper, spread that all over the paper. Now, what you don't want to do is you don't want to overspray where you have a puddle of water and it's literally dripping off the edges. That's too wet and it causes the paint not to stick to the paper very well and it makes it sort of run all over. So just enough to get the surface of the paper wet, and then you want to paint rather quickly. I recommend that you go from the lightest to the darkest. So blue if you'd like to include it, or if you just want to have purple and black for your space sky scene, that's totally fine too. So I have a little cup of water right here. I'm gonna get my brush wet. My paint's already been wet ahead of time. I'm gonna dip my brush in there and I'm just gonna sort of spread that blue in various random spots, and you can see how it starts to spread. The wet into wet technique is really cool because it allows that paint, that watercolor paint, to do what it really would like to do. I'm then going to go ahead quickly rinse my brush so I don't contaminate the other paints, dry it off just a little bit on that paper towel, and I'm going to pick up the purple. And then I'm going to mix that purple right into what I was painting. So I'm going to take that purple and I'm going to sort of spread it around, okay? Now I'm not trying to take my time and do this perfectly neatly because that's not what wet into wet painting is about. Wet into wet watercolor is about watching the paints do what the paints want to do. I've spread out that purple and now I'm going to rinse my brush one more time, dry it off just a touch, and now I'm going to add the black. The black is really dark. So don't be surprised if it looks like it's covering up some of the color because it will, but it'll sort of bring some of that back as well. So a little bit more black. You don't want to cover the entire paper in black, but I'm going to sort of spread those together. And you can see it's turning into sort of a purplish black. Most of the blue has disappeared, but there are still some little pockets of blue. If you feel like it's really dark, you can quickly rinse your brush, take a little bit more purple and sort of touch it in on the top of it, okay? But that's why we save the black for last, because the black is really black. Now, to add texture and to sort of create a like little bitty stars and texture in the sky, we're gonna take that table salt, and your fingers need to be dry, and you're going to simply sprinkle it all over your painting. You're going to sprinkle it all over. And what happens is that salt absorbs that color that's on the top surface and it draws it to itself and it concentrates it in certain areas. And when it dries, the salt will leave behind little tiny spaces where the color has been soaked up. So if you look at it, this is an example of what one looks like when it's dry. It looks very space-like. It almost looks very much like a galaxy you might see in pictures. You can see there's lots of really interesting texture in all of this. So when this dries, this is sort of what you can expect to see happening. The color lightens a little bit, and you can see that you've got all this really, really great texture. So we're painting a wet into wet, trying to create a space-like sky using your choice of blue, purple, and black. The blue sort of sets a little bit of a tone, but the black and the purple are the most powerful ones that you'll see there.